Hey guys, it's Rush. Today I'm going to be reviewing what I consider to be the best Tier 9 light tank in the game in light of the patch 1.0 meta changes and whatnot. So we're going to be reviewing the 54 lightweight if you haven't guessed. So the 54 lightweight is like I said, it's probably the best Tier 9 light tank in the game, and that's because it's got a reasonable amount of every single property that's required for a light tank. So you've got an okay gun. As you can see, you've got 208 pen, 250 alpha damage, 2469 DPM. The gun is like okay for a light tank. It's kind of reasonable. I would say it's one of the worst light tank guns, specifically because of the pen and the accuracy, but the other factors of this tank kind of make up for it, and in all things considered, the gun isn't that bad. So you've got the 250 alpha, 208 pen, 2469 DPM, and 0.39 accuracy. As far as the mobility goes, which generally is the main factor that's associated with light tanks, you've got 32.27 specific power, 53.33 traverse speed, and your top speed is 69 kilometers per hour. So basically, you can get to any side of the map that you need to within like a minute, which is really important, especially for good players who are able to use their map, because if you notice that one side is failing and you want to go help it out and you're on the other side of the map, you can get over there pretty much immediately. And that's where the mobility becomes really useful when it comes to playing lights. As far as the view range goes, I've got 453 meters view range with optics and BIA. And then for camo, 23.58 with my current setup right here. You can see I don't really have a lot of camo on this vehicle. So 23% isn't bad, but it's okay, all things considered, and it will get better if you have a better crew than what I have here. So that brings us on to crew. What I've got on my crew is I've got Brothers in Arms all the way down, 6th Sense, Repairs, and then a view range skill on the loader. The reason I run Repairs on light tanks is because in the current meta, I don't think camo is as relevant, especially at the beginning of the game, for light tanks. I think it's much more important to be able to repair tracks really, really quickly, because obviously light tanks, the second they get tracked, they die. So being able to repair those tracks, especially if you're trying to brawl, which I do, seems to be really, really useful, you know, in my experience at least. And then I've obviously got camo, because camo is really important for light tanks. Generally, what you'll find is that camo is useful end games, and then repairs are useful at the beginning of the game. So if you're trying to be useful consistently in every single game you play, repairs will be useful more of the time. But if you're trying to get like some sort of epic carry or whatever, that's when camo will help you out, because you'll be able to move around the map, get close to like camping TDs and so on and so forth, and that's when camo becomes useful, at least in my experience. As far as the equipment goes, V-stab, rammer, and optics, that's pretty self-explanatory. You could run vents and run food. That's sometimes what I do. You can see if I run vents, my view range will drop from 450 to 422, and then if you're going to run food or whatever, obviously that will bring your view range up. It hasn't updated, 440. So, you know, you can still kind of get some sort of reasonable view range with this type of thing. The reason you might want to not run optics on a light tank is if you don't find that you need extra view range, but you find trouble with the gun. So what I think, in my opinion at least, the reason you'd want to run vents and food is because it would help your accuracy and help your DPM. So total, depending on your playstyle, should dictate how you set up your tank. And then also keep in mind the cost, because obviously running food is kind of expensive. So if you're not going to run food, run optics. There's no reason to run vents on a light tank, because obviously 420 meters view range in a vehicle like this is just, that's way too low. So 431, same thing. So yeah, let's go take this thing into a game and I'll show you how it performs. Alrighty, so for this game, I was playing on Murovanka in my 54 lightweight, and the first play that I decided to make when I got into this one was to pop up to E7 to look for anyone who was going to the 9 line. I wanted to potentially spot any mediums who were trying to do that, and maybe get some early damage on any of the light tanks that were, you know, being aggressive, because light tanks go into this position. Now, generally, I advise not going into a position like this, but you'll notice I had a leopard and a grill with me, and they also didn't have arty. So, you know, for an early scouting / damage farming position, this was reasonable because they didn't have arty, and I had support, and so that's why it worked out the way it did. I was able to track the ELC, get a couple shots, and you can see now that we've won this position, I'm able to try to use it to try to figure out where any enemies that are coming to the 0 line are. Now, you'll notice I don't spot anyone. That's not because of lack of view range. That's just because the enemy probably drove through the K-line or whatever. And eventually what I'm going to do is I'm going to just try to find a position to do damage. And I'm going to do it relatively passively. Like frontline aggressive, but not suicidally aggressive. And the reason is because if you're in a light tank and you make a mistake and you take one hit, so you're down 30% of your hit points immediately. And in a situation like this, that's not very good. So I lag a bit here. You see that, but that's fine. What I'm going to do, because nothing flanking has happened on this side and I don't want to be pushing into a hull down ST1, I'm going to make a play to try to get to the 1-2 line. You'll notice that I noticed the M48 and the other two lights have actually pushed up. And so what I decide to do, because I'm not really going to be able to affect the 1-2 line where heavies and TDs are fighting it out, I'm going to be able to play a sort of flanking role or support tank role on the 0 line area in this map. Now, this is very typical of light tanks. When you're in a situation where you're in the middle of the game, only 2 tanks have died, and you're in a tier 9, like a mid-tier light tank, you don't want to be too aggressive. You're going to see I'm going to play this relatively intelligently, and I'm going to set a bit of a trap right here for this ELC even 90, and anyone who pushes down this 0 line. So I find a bush that I think is going to be relatively useful. This is generally characterized as a bush that TDs will sit in. I take a shot. That was awful, but this position is going to allow me to put side shots into anyone who's pushing, and that's part of the nature of flanking. If you want to flank people, generally you're going to have to do it from a defensive position, because if you're aggressive, you're going to run into some camper that you didn't expect. So when I'm in this position, I was able to put side shots into the pattern. The LTTB is driving into me. I'm in a really strong position. I end up tracking him, and here you can see the accuracy of this tank is a bit off. I aimed for his track, didn't get the retrack, and that's going to allow this LTTB to continue to drive into me and potentially get more damage. Now, the M4190 ammo racks the pattern, which is great. Now this LTTB is just kind of pushing into me. Because my position was so good, we were able to kill him, and the M4190 GF gave me a hand. We were able to kill him without losing any hit points, and we ended up basically getting an LTTB and an M48 pattern for relatively free. Now, from my perspective, once we had sort of cleared out that M48 pattern and all that was left was like a one-shot ELC, an ST1 and a 402, I looked at my map and I said, okay, where can I be the most useful in the game right now? Generally, if you're in a situation like this where you've kind of cleared out one side and then the enemy's pushing down another side, you don't want to try to scout. Like right now, if we took a look at this map, we can actually just keep watching, but basically a lot of people would be inclined to go scout out the ST1, scout the 402, scout any TDs that were camping at K7 or whatever. That's what a lot of light tank drivers would be inclined to do. That's a mistake because it would get you killed. So what I'm doing instead is I'm looking for safe opportunities to be useful, and I see this T32 who's overcommitted, so I'm able to put side shots into him to try to finish him off and, you know, give my teammates a hand or whatever. So the T32 ends up dying, and that creates a really interesting opportunity for flanking. Now, this is a genuine opportunity for flanking, but a lot of people confuse flanking with, like, you shouldn't commit when you flank someone, in my opinion. So what this WZ has done is he's given me his side, and me being here is extremely useful because all I have to do is be here to pressure that IS-4 and WZ. You can see me being here got that WZ killed. He made a bit of a mistake. I'm going to be able to put a shot into this 34. He loses a lot of HP. And very quickly, I'm sort of being relatively aggressive here. Now, the reason, like, I cannot almost say this is suicidal. Now, the reason this is kind of suicidal, you'll see as this progresses, I've got an IS-3, a Scorpion G who doesn't have shots in the IS-4, and a 263 who also doesn't have shots, who is my support. So when you're relying on a one-shot, like, tier 8 to be your support and you're directly behind a heavy, it's very common for the heavy just to be able to turn around and start focusing you down. So that's exactly what this IS-4 does, and he's actually able to turn his tank all the way around and start focusing me down. So what I do is I notice that immediately and I start running away, bait him towards the girl who is actually supporting me, and I get out of there. A lot of people don't know to do that in light tanks, but if you're making some sort of flanking play, that's exactly what you need to do. You need to watch the situation and make sure you don't get, like, YOLO'd by some IS-4 who's got like 5 tanks supporting him. So we back off to a safe location. Now this M4190 GF seems to be engaging this IS-4 very close range. What I've done is I'm looking for more safe opportunities. The thing is, we're 3 tanks down, and there aren't any as far as I can tell. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm just waiting for people to drive into me and give me shots, because once again, it's like, what am I going to do? Go circle a defender who's got 5 tanks supporting him? That's not going to work. So I take a shot at the defender who pokes up, and it's about here when I start looking at the map and thinking about the 0 line, because if the astute among you will have noticed that an ST1 and an FV422 have been unspotted for a significant amount of time, and if they had come back to base, they probably would have been lit. So there's the ST1. When I was live streaming this, I kind of expected him to be doing something like that. I actually expected him to be pushing up the 0 line and get to A9, but he ended up pushing through the mid, and this is another opportunity that a light tank is going to be able to take advantage of, because here there's this lone tier 9 heavy tank who I can engage with a Leopard 1 and a grill, and this guy doesn't have any support whatsoever. We don't know where the 4202 is, but really it's a 4202. He's not that big of a threat, and he obviously doesn't have any sniping TDs supporting him. So I'm able to drive into him, flank him, and work on, you know, just being a distraction, getting some extra damage, helping my team finish that tier 9 heavy right off. And now, once he's dead, I'm like looking at the map. I'm curious, where the hell is this 4202? Because chances are the 4202 moved up with the ST1, and there he is. The 4202 is right there. So I'm going to push into him. Right here I decide, like, I could have tried circling him, but I decide not to because obviously it wouldn't have been worth my hit points. I do a bit of a handbrake turn that lets me get my gun onto the 4202 and side scrape him at the same time. And then now this guy's a one-shot. I'm just going to try to side scrape him and put a shot into his turret, and that allows us to get the kill on the 4202, evening out the scores. So, you know, pretty action-packed game. What's going to happen here? This is, like I was saying this when I was live streaming, this is when light tanks become extremely useful in a game. Generally, if it's a 5v5, maybe a 6v6, especially a 4v4, the hardest part of carrying or winning those types of situations is camoed TDs. Now, they've got an STRV, a Scorpion, and another STRV. So those are like absolutely camoed TDs, and at the time it's like you can see the Leopard 1 dies to them. We have no clue how to deal with this, and so this is when light tanks become extremely valuable because they have the view range and the mobility to sort of outplay opponents who really don't have view range and mobility. So by coming to this position, I figure out where the defender is. Because I've made it to this position, I have side shots on this STRV. Unfortunately, the Grill gets himself killed, but we now figure out where the Scorpion is. We figure out where a lot of them are, and that puts me into a position where I'm with the T28, who's kind of on his own, and then I've got this defender who's potentially driving across the open field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to spot him. I think he's gone to this house to get safe. And, you know, I'm just going to sit in this bush to hopefully get more intel because we don't know. At the time, I don't have a plan on how to win. So it turns out the defender's YOLOing into me. I was thinking about how to win the situation, but because the defender just drove straight into me, that kind of forced my hand. I end up getting spotted as I leave this location. That means I'm going to get hit by an STRV. I think he ends up sniping my commander's hatch right here. Yeah, so that was pretty lucky on his part, but it's the way it is. Right now, I'm being chased by a defender. So when you're fighting a defender in a situation like this where he's chasing after you, or any heavy really, what you want to do is you want to get him to chase you so he has no more support. That's why I'm running away, because what am I going to do? Beat a defender when he's supported by 3 sniping TDs? It's like, that's not a good plan. So I'm running away to try to bait this defender towards me. That might create an engagement where I could potentially beat him, but I noticed that the T28's dealing with an STRV, and this is when I realized that the T28's a one-shot. So because an STRV just pushed into the T28, it's very common, like, how do I say it? My experience has been that pubbies will YOLO players together. So the T28 gets pushed by one person, and in my mind, I was like, there's going to be more enemies pushing into this guy. So I'm rushing over to try to help this T28. I get the tracking shot on the STRV, which is absolutely perfect. That gives the T28 enough time to finish off the STRV. And now that STRV, now it's a 2v2 basically, and I'm a tier 9 tank, and they've only got 2 tier 8s. They do have way more HP than us, though. We're both one-shots, so that's the situation. The defender ended up appearing in the mid, and because of the T28's position and because of my position, we have that guy in a bit of a crossfire. Currently, we don't know where the Scorpion is. My opinion, like, I wasn't thinking about him right now, but as the game progresses, I'm going to have imagined that he pushed the south. You're going to hear it if we maybe amp up the sound or something in a bit. But basically what's happening is this defender's YOLOing the T28. He could be at G3, or as far as I'm concerned, he could be behind me, and I'm kind of sort of ready for both. I do have side shots on this defender, so we're going to be able to just sort of sit camoed up, trying to save our T28 right here. Obviously, he's a one-shot, so that's a bit of a tricky situation. The T28 gets the track. This is where the gold ammo kind of lets, you know, the low pen kind of lets you down, but I get spotted. I get safe from G3 just in case the Scorpion's there. Put a shot into the defender, get the kill, keep the T28 alive, and I think it's right here. There, a shell just impacted somewhere. So you can see me like flailing wildly to try to figure out where that shell landed from. And I actually didn't know where it was, but based on the sound, I was like, oh, he could possibly be at G whatever, F8, that's where I pinged. I was wrong, the Scorpion was at G3, and so what I'm going to do is I see him YOLOing this T28. He's absolutely making the right play, the Scorpion is, and what's going to happen is the T28's going to get a shot into the Scorpion, and then I get the last shot into the Scorpion. That lands me with my 4th kill, and that's the win. So, you know, talk about a great game. Let's go take a look at the end plates. All right, so that was 59,000 credits, 3k XP. I think I had some boosters going or whatever, so I don't know if the boosters affect this, but if it doesn't, that was probably my highest XP game. That I think those were booster. Actually, I don't know. Oh my god. I don't think this includes boosters. So that was 3k XP with a premium account. Probably the highest XP that I've played in a long time. 29 shots fired, 26 hits, 20 penned. So like, you know, the accuracy of this gun isn't the greatest, but if you shoot a lot, you're going to hit a lot, and so that's pretty useful. 4451 damage, 4 kills. The grill ended up out damaging me, but, you know, I still did relatively okay considering it's a tier 9 light. And in the end, I only lost 8,878 credits, which is pretty impressive. And like, that's good. As far as I'm concerned, it's a light tank. Lights require gold. So that's a good result in my opinion. Let's go take a look at the other game, and then I'll tell you what I think about this tank and whether or not, like, I think it's worth keeping. Okay, my platoon mate's gonna murder me for this one, but we're gonna go with it anyways. Basically, we're platooning with Veg with the tuba. This is on Cliff, and once again, I'm in my lightweight. So the reason I'm showing this game is because I feel like it's a bit more normal in the sense that it's not some epic carry at the end. It's like, it's an epic game, but it happens over the space of 5 minutes, and it shows you what the 54 lightweight is capable of in those Raffle Stomp games if you play on the front lines. So I'm coming to Cliff. I'm going to this corner because they have a bat chat already, and I'm not really worried about playing this type of corner in a light tank. You're able to get a lot of early shots from this position, and that's going to be really useful. Now, because I'm in a platoon, you're going to notice that my platoon mate on the minimap is actually getting YOLO'd, and eventually what's going to happen is he's going to get YOLO'd by a plethora of enemy vehicles, and I see that, and I'm going to go help him because he's going to need it. Obviously, he takes a position that's relatively unrisky, you know, most of the time, but just for whatever reason in this circumstance, the enemies all rush into him and he's got to deal with it. So I come over to help him. That's what I'm doing here, is I'm creating a crossfire. So this is another example of flanking in a light tank. What you can see is I'm getting behind these guys. There's someone distracting them, so I don't have to take the hits. I'm not really taking the risk, and what I'm going to be able to do is just shoot them in the ass. This is an example of flanking. You kind of have to wait for people to overcommit before you start flanking people in your lights. Not like, if you read the forums, the forum advice typically in light tanks is that your job is to scout and flank people, but the way they the way they communicate flanking, it's really bad. The way I showed you flanking is basically how it's done. Someone has to distract the enemy, and then you have to make sure you flank someone in a fight you can win. So there's multiple prerequisites when you go to fight someone in a flanking situation. You need to make sure they're checked off. So A, you have to be able to win the fight. B, you have to make sure you're not going to get YOLO'd. So that's what happened in that fight. That's why it worked out. We're up to 1,800 damage and 3 kills. And now we're in a situation where there's a Scorpion who I would like to shoot at. And there's also an M103 who's going to move up, and I want to get shots onto him. So it's about here, I think, that my platoon mate gets prevented from camping by the camping prevention unit. Actually, it's an STRV who shoots him. Because the STRV kills him, we can kind of guess that it's the STRV at A5. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of play this position, and I want to get shots on the M103, who's obviously got a lot of HP on him, but I have to be careful about Artie, and then I also have to be careful about the STRV who killed my platoon mate. So you can see I come to this position, I end up spotting the Artie. Apparently the Artie doesn't really have sixth sense, so I'm just going to sit here. He's not looking at me. I'm able to pick up my 4th kill on this bat shot right here. He goes dark, but that's fine. I'm just going to shoot again, get the kill. And now we're in this perfect position once again where I'm in a flanking position to flank the 703, and again this is going to work because the guy's distracted, and if I make a mistake, I've got the HP to deal with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trade a bit of my HP to get more damage right here, because why not? I have HP. I think he ends up shooting HE at me or something. Yeah, that's HE. I'm able to put 3 shots into him. These are good trades as far as I'm concerned, because it's like, this guy's distracted, he's not really shooting at me, I'm able to put side shots into him, and that's a lot of free damage right here. So he's like YOLOing the E75. I'm just going to keep chasing him. I want to get as much damage as I can, and I think I'm going to pick up the kill right here, which is then going to allow me to push into... That's my 5th kill. The next thing is going to allow me to push into people. Now, obviously, I've got food in this situation, so the view range really helps when spotting this STRV right here. Obviously, we end up lighting him. He gets slid. That's going to give us a lot of spotting damage because my teammates are going to shoot at him. And then once he's dead, to make this into an even better game, because I'd love to get a Top Gun or even a Radley Walters, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push down. Now, one thing you're going to notice is I'm not stupid about my aggression here. I'm not going to push down when an STRV is above me and can totally farm me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure he dies. That was a totally skilled shot right there, by the way. I did that on purpose. I thread the needle like that consistently no luck involved. But basically, I had to wait until the STRV died, so I didn't get farmed in the side as I push into multiple tanks with tons of HP. So we drop down. It's relatively safe. We put a shot into the VK, managed to get our 7th kill. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to take the Yagged Tiger out of this fight because I've only got 1000 HP left and farm this Type 4 and Object 430. So that's what I'm doing by getting into this position. The Object 430 puts one into me. Once again, obviously, he's going to be extremely distracted because of the context of this game, but I have the HP to take a hit anyways, so we're able to just kind of sit here, put shots into people, and I think I get the high roll kill on this guy for the Radley Walters, and then the Yag Tiger dies. So, you know, it's one of those driving forward farming games, but that's basically it. I'm going to call it here. I'm not going to show the end plates out of sympathy for my platoon mate, but I'll go talk about whether or not I think you should get this vehicle because, you know, why not? Or keep it at least. All right, so when it comes to the question of whether or not you should like free XP through or get or keep the T54 lightweight, I would say don't free XP through it. First off, it's a reasonably good tank that's reasonably good in a multitude of situations. Should you keep it? Well, let me put it this way. The 54 lightweight is one of those vehicles that's going to be relatively fun on a consistent basis. I don't think it's one of those tanks that people will play for like 30,000 or, you know, 10,000 or 4,000 or even 1,000 games. But the 54 lightweight is just one of those tanks that if you're in a light tank platoon or if you're trying to get scouting missions, it's relatively good at that kind of thing. And because it's a tier 9 tank and not a tier 8 tank and not a tier 10 tank, you never run into those all tier 10 games, which are absolutely atrocious when you're trying to get any sort of mission because everyone is like loaded up on view range in all tier 10 games. It's really hard to scout. So I would say keep it. Like, I'm going to keep this tank because it's really good for missions. And then I would also say that it's relatively fun to play. So, you know, that would be my perspective as far as I'm concerned. It's not like being a light tank. It's not the best tank in the game because you can just play a medium tank that's going to be better than it 9 times out of 10. But given that compared to all the other mediums, like the only other tier 9 light tank that I would keep or compare to this vehicle is the Chinese one. The WZ132 or the WZ132A is the only other vehicle that I think is reasonable. And this is more of a medium light tank hybrid, whereas the 54 lightweight is like a dedicated type medium vehicle. So should you keep it? In my opinion, yeah, like it's worth more than the credits you would gain from selling it. And if you have a good crew for it and all that, it's a blast. So 54 lightweight, really good in my opinion. Absolutely would suggest getting it, partly because the tier 10 tank's a great tier 10 tank. It's used in Clan Wars. And then the grind to get to this vehicle, which I haven't mentioned this entire review, but the grind to get to this tank in particular is really easy. Like the MT25 is okay. I wouldn't really recommend grinding the MT25 in pubs, but strongholds it works. LTG is great for pubs. LTTB is reasonable for pubs, but you can also grind it in strongholds. And then the 54 lightweight's a blast, totally worth keeping. And then it leads to a Clan Wars viable tier 10 light tank that's also really good in pubs. So that's my opinion on the 54 lightweight. I'm going to call the review here. Hopefully it was informative, helpful, or entertaining. And, you know, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.